And we're on. Welcome to episode 20. No, episode.
We're way past that
not
one.
a good start. Episode 36 of the
Yes.
End of Seeking podcast with me, Martin.
And me, Imogen.
Welcome, everyone. Let's start with a couple of announcements, if there are any. I think there's a couple, maybe.
Well, mine's a non-announcement in that I am not doing satsang and transmission this Sunday on the 22nd, taking a weekend off for the last of the summer sun. So my next group meeting will be on the 25th of September. And then looking a little further out, I have a 5-day diving deep retreat coming up the second week of October.
Great. I've changed things up a little bit. I've got a new website redesign, courtesy of my multi-talented wife sitting right here opposite me. That's martinweber.com, MARTYN, martinweber.com. That's become the hub, really, for whatever I'm offering at any given time. But my main focus is returning to writing, contemplative writing, and sharing that. But what's changed is that I moved over to Substack to make that deliverable, so that if anyone's interested in reading, I'll be putting excerpts and the odd piece out on social media and whatnot. But what I'm really aiming for is to make my writing available in one place on a sort of subscription basis. So you can go to Substack, which is Martin Weber, MartinWebber.substack.com.
Which you can access through the website.
Which you can go through the website. But that will be all my writing, all my work will be there. There'll be a couple of tiers. There's just subscribe, and it'll get delivered to your inbox in your email. Anytime I write something new, it'll go out there. Substack's a great platform for writing. And there'll be a higher tier, paid subscriptions, $5 a month if you want to have some more, because there'll be some I'll be putting out free and some I'll be.
And just, I want to mention, doing your work in the course of doing your website. There's so much stuff on there that you've written so much, and there's so much that you haven't published over the years. I think people don't realize just how much your focus has been writing for so many years now.
And how much hasn't gone out, actually, and will be going out as time goes on. That's why I wanted to put it in one place that people can subscribe to that.
Yeah, you can really go down some rabbit holes. I mean, I had the fortune of really
you build out the
website.
archive on my website, didn't you?
Yeah, and just really, God, there's so much stuff there.
There's almost a couple of hundred written pieces there, on all sorts of topics, mostly spiritual, but some other stuff, creativity and whatnot.
Yeah. So I think it's a undiscovered gem probably for a lot of people. So
Nice of you to say so.
no, I do, having spent a week with it all.
So I've had a little bit of a hiatus from mostly daily or at least weekly writing, but that's shifting now. Now I'm leaning back in, and Substack will be the place. I encourage people just to sign up. It doesn't cost anything to sort of get to visit, or to just go put your email in, subscribe, and any new posts that are open for the public will be delivered.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, quite excited about Substack. It's a great platform for the written word, and it's really easy just to, you don't have to think about going and visiting and checking in for updates. It just gets, if you want it, you'll drop an email into,
well, of course, that's
into your mailbox.
We're hosted on Substack. This podcast is also hosted on Substack,
true.
so it's the same thing.
Good platform.
Yeah, really great platform.
That's a shout out to Substack.
Making it all possible, yes.
So that's me. That's you. Okay, what are we on about this week? Well, I have a few things.
Yes.
I'll start with a little piece that came out when I was writing the other week, which I thought was is interesting to some interesting, hopefully an interesting conversation. So I'm going to read it out, put my glasses on. Okay. The power of a practice such as meditation, centering prayer, or simply radical non-grasping kenosis, etc., is that it is the true surrender to the divine will acting in, through, and as you. It's practicing that. By releasing, letting go, you let God, the divine, work without resistance. We simply get out of the way of God's action and presence. Remain empty, keep quiet, be still, just be, thy will be done. These are all pointings to that truth. So if you really desire the divine to act in you, then get out of the way. Cease your objections, your preferences, your resistances. Give up the reins, in other words. There's a Sanskrit phrase that describes this action. It goes, Yatinam Brahma Bhavati Sarati, which translates as, to those established in the self, or unity, or yoga, Brahma becomes the charioteer. Meaning, the laws of nature themselves carry out action. This interestingly indicates that this kenosis has been known as a true principle of reality by many traditions throughout the long history of... Okay, I peter off there. Anyway, so that's the talking. That's the talking point right now.
We're broadly talking about the subject of surrender, which I think is something we've talked about talking on the podcast a lot of, and we've touched on in so many ways. You know, you could talk about surrender or non-doership. They're one and the same. But surrender is something that I think is very intimate to both you and I. The path of surrender. Yeah. That kenosis, that emptying out of the doer. Yeah.
And getting out of the way of that will, that movement of life and nature and being that's happening despite us. Yeah. Us being, in quotes, the small us.
The us that we believe ourselves to be when we haven't yet discovered our true nature.
Yeah. And the true way of things.
Yeah. And so, surrender is feels like something you do as a small self, and gives way to a description of a state of being or description of the true nature of life. Is that of surrender? Is that of the river of life, the flow of life?
It's funny. So the practice, let's say something like Pema Chodron would one of her practices is Shenpa, which is to say one is sitting in one's stillness in meditation, and whenever one notices that one is hooked, let's say that energetic, that whether it's a thought or sensation, one's hooked. It's like allowing that to release, and that's very much akin to the practice of centering prayer, which is resting in that non-grasping openness, and it's that noticing when the grasping arises, the contraction is allowing that to release. It's a notice and return to the unstructured openness. So
I just did a week-long study group in August
on meditation,
on this very practice actually, of resting as that beingness, as that awareness. But what happens when there is a picking up into content, and then the subsequent release of that, and that return back to the naturalness of the self?
So so there's this practice that looks like it's what starts off as practice becomes naturalness. And that's a if you're on the path, if you're engaged in spiritual practice, that there is a practitioner there implied.
Mm-hmm.
I am doing this, I am doing that. But the right practice kind of dissolves itself. It eats
Yeah.
itself
Yeah,
up
yeah.
and reveals, oh, that
Eats the practitioner
surrender
up,
is eats up the practitioner. Yeah, that the surrender isn't ultimately what someone does, although it does look like that, and that's the valid at its own level.
Yeah.
The fulfillment of that is the end of the practitioner,
Yeah.
and the recognition that the actual ground of reality is a field of perfect openness and surrender. That is our true nature. So it ceases to be something you do and becomes something that you are.
Absolutely. And that can be said for many ways into that.
Yeah.
Acceptance, it's another version of surrender.
Yeah.
You know, you need to accept. There's the practitioner
Yeah.
accepting, gives way to the description of life is a state of acceptance with
Yes.
what is. And that's no longer something you do, it's something you are. And, you know, there's many ways into that, but it's all, to me, other ways into the description of the divine surrender that comes around about through a recognition of your nature. And at that point, it's no longer my will be done, it's thy will be done. And that thy is the divine.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's not, I wrote something before, you know, thy will be done is not an instruction, but a description.
Yes, exactly.
That the will of the divine, the self, consciousness, however we want to, the absolute, is always acting out, always performing activity without the need for any
entity.
Delusional entity.
Yes.
Even, but you know, here's the thing, in, as, and through
Exactly.
us.
Yeah.
That even this that separation, division isn't true. There is still this human experience through which and as which the consciousness, the self, divine acts in, as, and through.
Yeah, because the fear is, from sort of an egoic point of view, is if I surrender all to the divine, I will cease to exist. Nothing will happen. Nothing will get done on a human level.
Right.
And to me, that's the biggest misinterpretation of all of this.
What did Adishant used to call something getting lost in the lost in the absolute, I think, was this idea that, you know, if you do, you know, define the absolute boundless field of being as your own thing, then somehow there's an actual turning away from
and that could be a stage
from
for
life.
sure.
It is, yes.
Yeah, like a subtle rejection of any doing, rather than just the disillusion of the doer.
Yeah.
But so the actual reality of the experience is not a cessation of existence. It's a total cooperation with existence as it flows through you as both the divine and the personal.
Was it Jean Klein? Enlightenment is absolute cooperation with the inevitable. And I'm in a quote mood, obviously.
That's good.
Ramesh Balsekar, doing happens, but no doer can be found.
Yeah.
So whether you're in the state of knowing awakening, or whether you're, you know, deep in the mire of, you know, confusion and delusion, doing, quote, still happens.
Yes.
So the idea that suddenly if the doer's gone, then no doing will happen. No. There's no, this is the field of karma, the field of action. This movement, this flux of manifest being continues. The only thing about awakening is that the delusion of the separate self is falsified.
At that point of recognition, what is realized is I am consciousness. All of this is consciousness. All action, all person, all non-doing, all doing, all absolute, all of it is the divine playing. Even the seeming separate self is that too. it's all seen through, and what's found is that deeper ground of that which we are and can never not be.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And that is also described in terms of equality, I would say, as that of inclusion and surrender to all of existence, the
Right.
totality of existence playing and displaying as this.
Absolutely. Yeah. From the viewpoint of practice, it's quite interesting. I'm called to mind of. I'm no scholar, no expert, but the Dzogchen teachings, they teach in levels. I think most Enlightenment traditions teach in levels, according to the ability of the student. And at a certain level, you can teach things like one-pointedness of mind, whether that's through a visualization or through a chanting or through a mantra. I think you probably covered this in your meditation course, the subtle objects, let's say.
Yeah, getting down to the subtle ones,
from,
like the
from
breath.
gross to subtle.
Yeah.
If someone's just coming in at spirituality or desiring practice, full mind, lots going on, you can't just go, hey, you're just consciousness, empty. That mind won't recognize that at that point. You have to purify and thin the mind down, and so what's offered is a singular point of an object of attention and awareness.
And that starts out at gross
quite
objects,
gross.
Gross as in obvious objects, a mantra, a chant, a point of focus, and get subtler and subtler to things like the breath, or even subtler, the sense of I am.
Prana, or the sense of I am.
Beingness, presence, those kinds of...
But ultimately, the teaching is simply the recognition that this is all an unstructured, non-doing field of consciousness. There is nothing to do. It's already thus. Tathata.
Pointing you
thusness.
to that, yes.
Yeah,
it's like we use these techniques to sort of, I was talking about this in a session earlier today, actually, like we use sort of seemingly beginning, at least, we use techniques to quieten the mind. And then people think that's the goal, but that's never the goal. To me, quietening the mind opens one up to be able to observe the nature that is beyond the mind. And then it doesn't actually matter whether there's a noisy mind or a quiet mind.
Typically, though, one would say...
Yes. Yeah, that's where I was about to go.
Okay.
No, you got there. Yeah, so it's like it's not the goal.
It's
the
almost like
mind.
quietening the mind. It's almost like pure. It's not just quietening, like suppressing.
Yeah.
It's purifying the mind, isn't it? It's
reveal,
thinning out those mental densities to have a much more avidya. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's revealing.
Clarity.
It's like going from thick velvet to the lightest silk.
Yeah.
And the mind, it's not that we have to get rid of the mind, it's that it becomes so see-through. And the nature of one's own self shines throughout the mind then. It no longer is obscured by densities of belief and conditioning in the mind. That divine light shines through.
Indeed.
And exists and is known and is recognized as the self, regardless of if there is a very noisy mind or a quiet mind. But it just so happens that typically, although not exclusively, but typically, the mind of one who no longer sees it as the seat of self does tend to drop away somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, my mind got very much quieter.
Yeah,
I mean, it was getting progressively quieter before, the inflection of awakening. But, post that, it's because you're seated in as that silence.
Yeah.
And it's so... It has this sense of profound fulfillment, and the mind just doesn't run off so much. It can be used. The mind is still a useful
Functional tool.
and I think that's why, for me, writing came online quite quickly after that shift.
Point of no return was what just
Yeah.
came to me. I started smiling.
Right.
That was
Point of no
the point
return,
of
yeah.
no return. Yeah.
Well, actually, that's interesting because one of the I think one of the Buddhist schools talk about non-returning or non-retrogression. There's a point at which
Yeah.
practice
balance tips sufficiently.
It's like there's no more. There's nothing left there's nothing needed to sustain
Yeah.
the all pervasiveness of awareness. It is all, the light is on, let's say, and is always on.
Abiding, yeah.
Abiding, exactly, established in that. So it's interesting how writing came online quite quickly, because my experience of that, and we talked about that in one of the early podcasts, the experience of say writing is for me an experience of receptive listening.
Oh, absolutely.
And whereas I had written a little here and there before.
Well, you did The Artist's Way, didn't you?
I did The Artist's Way, and morning pages were part of that. So every day I'd write. But, it was very much a product of a busy mind. And it was
a product of a person as well.
Right. Yeah, which is, what's a person other than a kind of a bunch of beliefs in a busy mind,
Totally.
So suddenly, sitting down in that silence, I can sort of discern single thoughts and threads of thoughts as they arise, not as just a muddle of noise, but very distinctly, there's a thought, there's a thread of thought that's arising within the silence of my being.
A clear emanation of wisdom.
And so it becomes very easy to just, write that down, capture that.
That's absolutely been my experience as well.
And it's speaking too.
Yeah, and it's like everything, and actually action as well, I would say, comes from that place. People, I think, assume that there's forethought. And actually, the actual direct experience of it is it's just happening. Writing's happening, speaking's happening, action is happening.
Yes,
it's like the words I want to use. I know this sounds very religious, but it's like the divine God moving in you as you.
Right.
It's like the hand moves, the mouth moves.
Yeah, there's no person doing it.
The body's moved. It's like,
that's the experience.
Yeah, it's to me, it's like this emanation or this inspiration, sort of lit up from within, that guides in this manner of what we think of a person doing. But to me, that's just not. It's centerless. There's emptiness dancing. That's the phrase.
It's funny because centerless. That's amazing. That's interesting that word came up, because I was thinking Jeff Foster's sort of tagline or website is "Life Without a Center," and that very much describes it.
Yeah.
That there's no person in the middle here. There's no entity here. There's simply this being that we are. That I am. Beingness, that field of open consciousness, empty, silent, full, stirring in its own nature. And so that's the experience of that.
Yeah, it's emptiness moving, it's beingness moving, it's the divine acting out in the way it must, and that's the flow, that's the surrender. It's like you surrender to that. To me, it's the opposite of a non-doing. It's you're making yourself entirely available to the flow of life, the will of life, the movement of life. And there's no distortion of that then, because it's not being distorted by those limiting beliefs and concepts and ideas and wounds and traumas and all of that. It's like there's a sort of an innocence of movement of life.
It's like
happens.
Being the sort of wellspring of your own experiencing,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is, like, speaking with people, they want more of that, but they have a trouble in seeing it that's already happening in their life.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's already happening.
The ego, the claim of separation and authorship is actually a lot less than people think it is. And you actually start to dive in observation. If you allow yourself to slow right down and dive in observationally to, okay, what is my actual experience? And I do this with people all the time. So you really see them light up as they suddenly recognize, okay, actually, I'm insisting that there's a me doing all of this all the time. But if I actually look at my experience, yes, there may be me assertions and also reactions to a me that is unsaid, say, but it's not quite as much as I think it is.
No, and it's really believing these false statements that let's say are almost constitute the small self. Yeah. Actually, when you look at it, you realize, well, what constitutes what I think I am is just a bunch of claims.
And unexplored assumptions.
And unexplored assumptions. Well, the claims are sort of based on those unexplored assumptions, aren't they?
Totally.
And the answer to the great mystery is simply to observe one's experience with sufficient clarity that it dispels all false ideas around it. And some of those false ideas are profound, like that I am a separate being that can operate in a world of space and time,
and is in charge,
and is in charge, exactly. And therefore, then the thicket of view says, well, that means other people are and should and could and whatever, and so the
before you know it, have
guilt,
a whole world.
You have a bunch of guilt and you have a bunch of regret, and you have, rather than this whole
or
field.
Pride.
Or
There's
pride.
The
Well,
I've succeeded.
Ego,
I did this.
Ego and entitlement and all this.
Yeah,
rather than what's humility except the true recognition of I don't do any of this. I mean, we talk about the practice to get to a place where you are surrendered or surrendering, but ultimately the humility that comes online, and not like I'm so awful, not that kind of humility that I'm a wretched creature, I'm a worm. It's the recognition I don't do any of this.
Yeah, this is all by grace.
This is all by grace.
It's all by grace.
But of course, then there's this inseparability between the grace and your own being.
You are that.
You
grace.
are that.
You are that, and that's
grace
is
an express. Yes.
Yeah, that's the point of no return, let's say, where there is a recognition of I am that.
Yes. And, you will find this most readily in let's say, the Vedanta and, Vedic, those expressions, the Mahavakyas of, consciousness is all there is. Atma is Brahman, the let's say the individual soul is the universal being itself. They're indistinguishable. I am that, thou art that, all this is that. Tattvamasi.
Yeah, I mean, you also see it in the Christian mystics, also the Sufi mystics and prophets, and I'm sure in Buddhism as well, and all the other things we're not mentioning in terms of, just individuals out there with that direct recognition that has been born within them.
Yeah. And so the mystics are speaking from experience.
Yeah.
I love that. There's the Meister Eckhart quote: the theologians of the world may disagree, but the mystics of the world all speak the same language. And there's a oneness at the heart of all this. There's a singularity of being that that is experientially found, turn within, explore, observe, inquire, recognize, realize.
And it's not about knowledge. It's not about getting something intellectually. It's about discovering your own light. It's about discovering the nature of who and what you are. It's about directly falling into recognition with the divine. And
it's really about so much of the work, let's say, of satsang, of self-inquiry is about popping and dispersing and unraveling, because sometimes these false viewpoints can be really, really wound up, really knotted up like a ball, like a I don't know, a ball of wool that's been, messed up. It's all knots. It's all, and you've got to unravel it because it's that which is obscuring. It's nothing.
And mostly we don't even recognize it,
No.
though. We don't recognize our beliefs, that they are beliefs. We just orientate our entire life around that, the consequence of that belief, rather than even seeing that it is that.
Yeah. Well, we're conditioned into a paradigm by our parents and our teachers and our culture. And an unexplored life then carries that on and perpetuates that forward and forward and forward. And so, it takes then work to unlearn.
Yeah, bring light
The
to all
work
of
is
those.
so much of it to unlearn
It
what
is.
has been learned and taken for granted as falsehood. And it's from a deep level, from a deeper, level, let's say, in the Leela, the play and display of all this, even the false self is not a mistake. It's just
Well, even that is consciousness too.
Exactly. It's just playing out. But at a certain point, at a certain point in let's say the development, I mean, this is definitely a relative view. In a certain point of the development or of a soul, falsehood becomes absolutely
Yeah, a straitjacket.
a straitjacket.
And it's like the character can no longer sustain. The cracks begin to show of that falsity.
Yeah.
And some people can go through their entire life without
most
actually
people do,
hitting
yeah.
into those cracks sufficiently that things start to fall apart. And so, we consider those moments of cracks as actually a good thing in terms of the spiritual journey. Like
Yes.
the cracks that begin to show of the falsity of the separate self, the cracks that begin to show of I'm in control.
And
All
often
of
these
that.
cracks show up as actual suffering.
Yeah, and actually, so all of that in terms of the spiritual development or unraveling or journey, you could say,
The journey of the soul, let's say. Yeah.
those cracks, which, like you said, often look like suffering, are good things
Yes.
because they are revealing where there is something to crack open.
Yeah.
And what happens in those cracks, I think it's a Rumi quote, although I'm terrible at quoting. So it's like the cracks are where the light comes
Right,
through.
right.
I know I'm misquoting that, but
No, that
that's
sounds about
roughly what he was saying there. It's like in those cracks, you see the truth, you see the light, you see like awareness shines through those cracks, clarity, truth shines through that crack. Love shines through that crack. Our true nature, that of love, shines through that and guides us into those cracks so that we can surrender into the mystery that is beyond the known. So whereas all those cracks are sort of I get the image of an egg where it's all sort of whole but it's like the cracks begin to show, and it's like you find as you traverse through those cracks and into those cracks, you come into the mystery beyond what you think you know. Nice. And where you surrender to that and allow yourself to sink into that mystery, that's where you really find, I get the image of the dragon in the cave with the gold, it's like that's where you find that which you seek. In those cracks.
I think what's beautiful as well is that that this shift that happens seems to happen on this path as it sort of picks up. And we've talked about this many times, and we will continue to, I'm sure, is that this shift from the perception of oneself as a seeker to this growing understanding and recognition that we are actually being called and led into this. Yeah. That it's not like I'm going out trying to find something. It feels like that for a while, but after a while, or maybe early on, anyway, part of the closer to that truth is we are being called home, and we can trust that process. And rather than making efforts to get somewhere, we are actually releasing our resistance to that gravity of that, which is into our own being, returning home to our own truth. And that itself has always been calling us back.
Yeah, and that's why I always think, like, you know, like seeking. There's a lot of sort of down views on seeking sometimes, and I'm like, you're seeking something outside of yourself, and it inevitably leads to a dead end.
Right.
To me, I see great value in that, because it's like it's almost this idea of neti, the Buddhist sort of practice of neti. It's like you have to go down this road of seeking to this thing to go, it's not that.
Right.
I am not found
Right.
there.
Yeah.
I was always found here. And so it's like, to me, seeking actually is a way in which we can come to terms with that inevitable calling that is in all of us, and lay down our sense of I don't have this. I need to go out there and find this.
Right.
It's a way of laying that down and coming into surrender with oneself.
And you can really trust that, right? I mean, although that's something that grows, and the trust that no matter which direction you actually go into your learning, it
all roads lead back to the self.
All roads lead back to and what did I can't remember who said it. It might have been Jung, who I read recently. It was fools who persist in their foolishness become wise. You know, that you keep going in a direction, even if it's the wrong direction. You're learning.
Totally.
You go, oh, not this. And the wisdom that comes from
fully
making.
On board with
This other quote I remember reading. Someone had said, "I've made so many mistakes in my life, and I've learned so much from them. So I'm planning on making some more."
Great.
And you know, it's like our path is basically where you lay your feet.
Yeah.
Because it's this bit deeper understanding to me that I feel that we're not a world full of individual, separate souls driven by self-will who can go so far astray that they're lost. Mm-hmm. You know, and you see this reflected in so many of some of the Christian views that are very much about being willful, and you know, they talk about like hell as a place where, well, it's your own fault because you're sort of defiant, and it's like as if the let's say the sin or the you know, whatever of the individual can be so bad it overcomes like the divine God's ability to save you. It's like some petty individual view. I guess what I'm trying to point to is this a richer, more universal understanding that we are all being called home, and nothing can get in the way of that.
No.
And so some individual, mistakes or brokenness or something, that is not enough that can stand in the way of the divine, of our own being calling us back into the fullness of that experience and reality.
And actually, I'll go one step further to say that even that mistake is still the divine's method in which it's giving us those lessons by which we come to know what our nature is.
Exactly. We can't be fully happy, settled, content, free until and unless we return back to our true nature. That's the only place where the mind, the heart, all of our being is satisfied and at peace, which is why it is the end of seeking.
Yeah. And the good news is we already are that, as in that which is looking out of these eyes right now is that divine light.
Yes, indeed.
It's not so far, people have this idea that somehow it's this other state, other thing out there that I don't have access to, that someone has a paywall in front of, that
I can't get it.
I can't get at it. And it's like, no, that which you're seeking, you are seeking from.
Yeah. Right.
You are that.
You are that. And so it's just a case of coming to recognize and see and dispense with those notions.
Yes.
And sometimes those notions are embodied,
Oh,
know,
very
that
much
they're
so.
energetically, so it's not
Yeah.
just a case of just dropping a thought. It is, but it isn't also.
It is. It goes beyond just on the level of the psychology and the
Yeah.
intellect. It's an energetic
Yeah.
transformation. You know,
Yeah.
we talked about the spiritual journey is not just an intellectual journey. It's a
No.
journey of transformation. It's a journey of change. It's a journey of dissolution from limiting, contracted, embodied beliefs and ideas that say I am not that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it is the journey home.
Ultimately, it's to return to the ground, to
Yeah.
return the recognition that all this is that.
Exactly.
Never was anything other. This is God.
Yeah.
That question, what is God? What isn't?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And same because, what is consciousness? What isn't consciousness? It's.
Yeah. So it's not something you don't already have. It's something you already are, but is veiled from you in beliefs that say I'm not that.
Right. Yeah, and then those beliefs embedded, let's say, as energetic knots in our
Contractions in the
contractions in our
physicality.
system that sort of reinforce these limited views, limited experiencing.
Yeah, and so you could talk about surrender in another term here if we're talking about energetic knots. Surrender is I would say, when you talk about surrender bodily wise, physically wise, it's that of energetic flow. It's that of openness, that of non-contracted energy of life. So that's how you would describe surrender in terms of energy, I would say, or the physicality of life. It's that of free flow. It's that of movement without constrictions.
Yeah. And it's interesting. There's a thing in obviously in science and physics that's and it's a kind of interesting metaphor for life in that saying limitation and life in openness and oneness, and it's this distinction between the particle and the wave, or the particle and the field, that people move around as if we're all particles moving in some empty space. And then when you look more closely, you realize, these particles are just vibrations, waves in a underlying singular field, like waves in an ocean, waves in a field, and never separate. Even if it shows up as this distinct thing, it's actually, if you look at a wave in an ocean or a particle in physics, it seems to stand alone. There's a particle in empty space, but actually that particle, look closer, it's on the smaller particles, and then those particles are just waves in a singular underlying field. Never disconnected, always just simply an expression of the one, never disconnected from the one. And it's that, do you live in particle consciousness or do you live in wave/field consciousness? It's like that's the experience, the energetic feeling of, I'm separate, I'm contracted, I'm split, I'm divided. And then that deep dropping into that deep energetic level of being, introducing yourself to that, and you realize you are that boundless field of being itself, that you're not disconnected from anything. It's all a singular oneness.
Yeah, you can actually go and test this for yourself, by just sitting down into your body and feeling the difference between the body and the chair. You can start to feel where there's differentiation, not separation. There's, the arm feels different than the chair, sure.
Yeah.
But when you get really close down, you allow your attention to really be drawn down into the seeming boundary between the two. And the whole thing starts to become much more fluid and much less defined in its differentiation. The arm molds into the chair in terms of the boundary of the two. When you really allow your attention to get to those subtlest levels, it's like you can't find the delineated hard line when you get close enough. It's like a magnifying glass. You get closer. What you thought you were looking at is not at all what you are actually looking at.
Well, that was, I think, what did I write a few years ago? Something like, and it was a commentary on science, actually, because science is the objective view, looking at reality from an objective view, rather than what we're doing is a subjective, which actually includes the objective. But this observation that as science over the ages went looking for deeper and deeper, looking for bedrock, looking for the fundamentals of reality, and you go smallest pieces. What are the smallest pieces, and looking for trying to look for that the final building blocks. The idea that they would be building blocks, and as we got closer and closer and observed more and more closely, instead of becoming more and more concrete, it became more and more abstract, more and more open, more and more unified. It's just simply, it's much more, the deeper, more closely you look at it, the illusions break down. And that's the thing of at the surface, it looks like we're
table.
separate, and we presume that differentiation between an arm and the space in which it moves is somehow fundamentally separate. And the closer you look at that, you realize that it isn't separate. It's a differentiated, let's say, quality of what is, but it's not separate from it. It's a singular reality expressing itself in infinite ways and dimensions, and that's the process of self-inquiry, though, right? I think you did a version of it, because you did. What did you do earlier on this year? There was you did like a workshop with.
Oh, the Enlightenment event.
Yeah, and you explained what you were doing with some of that.
So this was an event that was going over many months, and on my portion of this event was a workshop on energy, basically, on divine light, and it was for people that weren't necessarily exposed to pure satsang, pure sort of spiritual inquiry and these kind of things. So I did it in a very practical manner, whereby we went through all the different layers of human experience, and found that we went through these different layers and found the energetic sort of experience underlying each of these layers. So thoughts, we've found the energetic experience of thoughts. Emotions, found the energetic experience of emotions. Bodily sensations, found the energetic, and actually beneath all that energy, so seeing everything as just different expressions, different waves of energy, different textures, tones, tastes of energy. Beneath all of that was this underlying field of consciousness, this awareness that is aware of all of this, that is given rise to what we think of as a person, is actually just sort of waves of experience arising from the silence of being.
Interesting. There was something, I think it was Tesla, the great engineer, the great of electricity. He's a bit of a mystic Nikola Tesla. Yeah, that's right. And he was talking about if we want to understand. I'm paraphrasing him a bit, but if we want to understand the nature of reality, then we need to be thinking in terms of energies, frequencies, vibrations. Yeah, and that's a big part of this sort of tantric kind of view of it. It's energetic. It's all a singular field of energetic awareness. That's the Shakti of it. That's the Shiva Shakti of it.
Totally. I used to be so against this. I used to like sort of think of all of this energy, vibrations, frequencies, all of that as really woo-woo. That was totally my view of it. Like just totally rejected all. Oh, it's not that, you know. But it's so funny how life like really humbles you. Like it like literally puts me in the center of all of this. The one thing that I'm like, oh no, not any of that. That's all woo woo. It's like literally I'm spending all day every day doing it, like being, you know, talking about this and experiencing this. And to me, it's blown me away how, you know, life is felt in its energetic experience first and foremost nowadays. It's like that's how life is experienced. The energy of life, the differentiated substratum of life is an energetic experience, a field of different textures and tones and vibrations of energy that gives rise to what we think of as a wall or a car or a person or an animal. All of it is energy.
Well, of course, you know, where the woo, it arguably from an awakening point of view, from a non-dual point of view, is that, you know, if one becomes as a spiritual seeker, practitioner, whatever you want to call yourself, or and is just seeking to manipulate, to identify the energetic nature of reality, but simply is there in a disconnected way, that you can have an energetic sense of it all, but still be in ignorance, still be in separation consciousness.
Yeah.
And so it's that oneness of that's the important thing to recognize, that one doesn't want to, you know, just be a sort of a spiritual energetic materialist where, you know, you're
Good vibes.
Good
only.
vibes. And you can have a sense of it. You can have a sense of the energetic nature, but ultimately it's not liberating unless one has recognized the singular nature of it all.
And at that point, although there's provisional and nominal and relative recognitions of different energy, it's all seen as energy, and I am that. So it's all seen as consciousness. It's all seen as the vibrations of consciousness.
Yeah, being itself.
And no longer fundamentally separate, as in right and wrong, this and that, not this, not that, but that. You know, all of that separation is what collapses, and what is seen is it's one field or ocean of vibratory Shakti or energy of life moving, and I am that. And there's no fundamental separation between me and you.
Yeah.
There is just a differentiation of fields and energies of vibration moving in that one singular ocean of pure consciousness.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that's the juice.
Yeah. No good or bad energy, just different energy. And it is all of the same.
It is funny that this became very much your focus and experience, you know, really post awakening.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Quite a ways into it, I would say, even. A few years into it, even.
Yeah, you never know what's going to unpack.
No.
You know, once you're sort of established in it, and it's like, in Brahma Bhavati Saradi, you know, Brahma's charioteering, you know, life is operating in its own way, on its own speed.
Yeah, well, you've at that point surrendered to that recognition. You become in service, and I've sort of spoken about that in a while, in a number of ways. And you know, to me, the experience is you become in service of the divine, and it's like the divine
as a description, not even as an occupational vocation.
But this is how the divine is using me in this manner, and I'm like, okay. And of course, I am that divine as well. There's not a separation there, but it feels less about what I want to do and more about what life is sort of burgeoning from within as what is needed in the collective in that moment, in that way, in that time.
What are you literally being moved to do?
Yeah. What are you being called to? And that's it. And for each of us, it's the discovery of that. When you take away all of the conditioning that says I should do this, I should do it like that, I must be like that, what you're left with is your true dharma, your true service, your true way in which life wants to move. You know, you're talking about recentering around writing. You know, there's the act of true dharma is like, what is there an overflow of energy for in my life? Okay, it's writing. Okay, it's transmission.
Well,
okay,
we'll see. Even now, who knows? You know,
that can turn on a dime as
Yeah.
well. It's like when you're done with that, and that's the karma playing out. You know, it's like
when it's done with you.
yeah, when it's done with you, it's like that can change too. Like, and so any notions of I've found my purpose and this, that, and the other has to be held so lightly, because
Yeah.
you have to recognize that it's the divine. If the
Yeah.
divine wants to turn you on a 90-degree angle and move you in a different direction one day, because that's what's necessary for this individual soul, but also the collective consciousness as a whole, then you got to believe that that's what's going to happen. No matter whether you kick and scream over that or not, it's still what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, Maharshi used to talk about, you know, frame this reality moving us as spontaneous right action. That, you know, everything we, you know, when established in that, everything that's occurring is correct according to the need of the time, and it's living in that flowing reality, which is consciousness interacting with itself in all these myriad and diverse ways. It's happening beforehand, before even one realizes that this is happening, and then but at some point you go, oh, this is what's happening.
You get on board with the program.
Yes.
Because it's
Absolute
there's already
cooperation
a
with the
subtle
inevitable.
movement. There's already a subtle movement before it even comes into full manifestation. This is my view of life, at least. It's like even the seeming decisions. There's a movement of life that's happening so much more fundamentally and subtly before
Right,
we
from
even
the
get to
very
the point
depths,
of being able to see an obvious thought that seemingly leads to an obvious decision, that seemingly leads to an obvious action. There's already a whole wealth of movement and an ocean, a current already starting to pick up pace before any of that comes into actual being.
Absolutely. And we are the sort of witness and the sort of participant of that.
Totally, yeah. The doer.
The stirring from the depths, from the silent depths, starts to stir in its own nature of our own consciousness. And then, as you say, these subtle raising and working through the different layers of who and what we are, ending up in a...
Yeah, it just reminded me of my Maharshi school days, where I was a very poor student of Rishi Devaturn Chandas.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm sure you're much more of a ability to unpick that one. But the idea that we are both the knower, the known. Yeah, exactly.
And they're three nominally separate principles of nature. It's like the three gunas, Rishi, Devara, and Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. You know, the three aspects, the three main principles of reality interplaying with each other spontaneously. You know, their qualities, qualities are principles of consciousness are operating and interacting with themselves spontaneously from within, and that gives rise to this.
Yeah, it gives rise to a seeming person that is acting and doing in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Are you done for today?
Yeah, why not? It's a good chat.
Yes.
Okay. So, thank you for listening. Anyone, if you want to subscribe, and share, that would be much appreciated.
Also, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
Yes. Bye for now.
Bye for now.